Welcome boys and girls, Christine here with a discussion about some of the most broken and bannable campaigns in Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires. Broken in the sense that the legendary lords on this list are so ridiculously over the top that they completely trivialize campaigns one way or another. And bannable in the sense that if you're looking to play a multiplayer campaign, for instance, no one will want to deal with these legendary lords for the most part. There are some exceptions, but even with certain races on this list as a whole, people don't want to deal with them because they are so ridiculously crazy. Now, not all the legendary lords on this list are good, but they are absurdly strong. And we start at number 5 with Malice Darkblade. The alternative, by the way, is actually Lokier Felheart. The reason Lokier would be a contender there is infinite black arc, significant amount of post-battle loot, income from sacking settlements, being able to get a settlement in Nagrand while having the campaign in Lustria, adds for a huge amount of power. But from my point of view, Malice does easily take the cake. Because you do have a choice. You can either keep a settlement over here in Hag Reef and try and expand over here with that kind of dual start situation. You can also try and rush for the Sword of Cain with him, if you're willing to go down that path, which gives you a significant level of power, especially if we're thinking about the multiplayer campaign situation. And then, on top of that, you also have the top bottom meter over here with him. So you either get a significant amount of combat power with full position, including Sarkhan, but also melee attack, missile strength, physical resistance for his entire army. 40% physical resistance is pretty crazy in a lot of ways. Or you use the potion, the elixir, which grants you up to 2 loyalty per lord for lords every turn, reduces corruption, gives you 100 growth in all provinces. 100 growth is completely insane, but it reduces your combat ability. Still, it's worth saying that Malice Darkblade is still, even with that kind of melee attack reduction, is still pretty powerful as a legendary lord. And it's not like you lose completely in terms of combat ability because you unlock the right of the War Master. Now, it's worth saying Malice is a one-man doom stack, and he does have a lot of skills over here that helps with that, especially reducing enemy leadership of armies, giving you a ward save if you're transformed into Tsarkan, campaign move range, all those kind of things. But it's not over. You also get some objectives. Not really a great campaign objective system, but you do get some objective Sarkhan Whispers that give you further benefits during the course of your campaign. And then there's the rights. So you have the Sacrifice to Mathlin, Sacrifice to Cain that all other Dark Elves have, except Lokier, who just summons Black Arcs through ports that he controls. You get 2 different things. One, you can summon an endgame army of Hydras, Black Dragons, Cold One Knights, Medusae. Like, if we look at this army, just if I take this settlement, right? Over here. If we take this settlement, we take the money, so that's enough money right there. And we then use the potion, and then we use the right. This is not an army that anyone can really defeat in a reasonable manner in a campaign. Like, seriously, you look at this army, the Black Dragons, the War Hydras, it is crazy. And because it's always present in your capital, it means that even if you do defeat Malice Darkblade, even if you lose everything with Malice Darkblade, you have the ability of recovering against pretty much anything. It might be worth it to have a couple of lords to be able to recruit higher end lords specifically, like you would level them up and then you'd disband them, but you could just recruit them to replace the army leader over here, because the army leader is random and he starts level 1. But even with a level 1 army leader, this is bananas. But then, even further, you can have the Gift to the Witch King, which also gives you 1 hero of a certain level, depending on how many settlements Malekith controls. Any hero you want. The traits are random, all that. But the fact that you can get any kind of hero on your faction leader, so on the field, is pretty significant. Then there's the fact that you start with the Black Arc. It's not Lokier situation, but you can get the tier 2 Black Arc fairly quickly in Malice's campaign and then tier 3. So that's more hero recruitment, more unit recruitment. You have a fairly safe starting position. No one's really going to bother you over here. for a long time, so you end up with a ridiculous campaign loop. Now, from the perspective of sheer economy and campaign power, in some ways, or in a lot of ways, Lokir is better in terms of building a massive empire, but when you combine the sheer power of individual armies that Malice may have, including his one-man Doomstack, it ends up being quite ridiculous. Dark Elves in general kind of are on the edge. I would not say they go over that line as a race as a whole, but the things that I've done in Morathi campaigns, the things I've done in Lokir campaigns, the things I've done even in Malekith campaigns or Hellbrand campaigns are pretty ridiculous. Malice and Lokir do go over that line, way above it. There's going so over that line they can't even see the line anymore. Now, this is not necessarily a campaign I would recommend people to play. I think it's pretty boring in a lot of ways. Starting position dynamics, too much power, but it's combat power for the Legendary Lord. But it is absolutely broken. And number 4, we have Orion of the Wood Elves. And if Orion is only number 4 on this list, it kind of gives you an idea of what this list looks like. Because Orion is simply ridiculous. His campaign start is absolutely limited compared to the other Wood Elves. He has the slowest campaign start of all of the Wood Elves. But what he ends up getting longer term ends up being, simply put, insane. Say you're playing a multiplayer campaign and someone were to pick Orion. You either kill Orion in the early game, which you can because he does have the weakest Wood Elf army, or in the longer term situation, you flat out lose because he will have infinite armies for free. He'll have a stronger economy, he'll have a lot of campaign flexibility, he'll have a lot of power. See, the thing about Orion's craziness, he has a teleportation benefit. So he can teleport with the Deep Roots far faster than most other people during a wild hunt. And you start in a wild hunt. Keep that aspect in mind. He does get various benefits through the titles, all those kind of good things. And Wood Elves have a really powerful army situation between Treekin, Glade Guard, Deepwood Scouts, and eventually Way Watchers. So that is a really powerful dynamic that Orion does have available to him. Combine that with the wisdom of the Eagle Lords, which grants you vision over all Wood Elf forests, so that means more declarations of war that you can use. Again, it is a slower start than many other campaigns on this list. But the sheer ridiculous potential is absolutely out there. Dryka is better in an early game situation, but in terms of sheer scalability, few people match Orion. There is a limitation because of how few settlements the Wood Elves have, but let me also say this. Any single Wood Elf settlement is an absolute nightmare to take. The defensive layout of these settlements make it so that actually fighting a battle to attack these, even against the basic garrison of them, let alone if they have an army, and if you're playing against Orion, he certainly will have a lot of armies. But in this kind of situation with these settlements, let alone the Oak of Ages, the defensive layout of these types of settlements is so strong for the defender, which is actually rare in a siege situation. Most siege layouts don't really favor the defender in a lot of ways. For the Wood Elves, they do. And that makes dealing with Orion a pretty annoying thing, unless you can manage an auto-resolve, but since you can have infinite armies. The only real limitation is that Wood Elves have limited recruitment slots, and so Orion's start is slower than, say, Durfoot, Dryka, or Sisters. Once he gets going, he is not going to be stopped. Plain and simple on that entire subject. And that is what makes him completely ridiculous to deal with as a Legendary Lord. Infinite money, it really comes down to the fact that you get a minus 8% upkeep cost for each warrior in for Orion's army and minus 4% for all other armies. There should be a limit on this. There isn't a limit on this. I have to say to Creative Assembly on this subject, there's a lot of things, there's a lot of changes that they made, implemented, and then they should have added a fix follow-up. They should do this for Elements of Destruction as well, and they never did. And, like, just seriously, implement a limit to how far this upkeep benefit can go. Like, let's say 20%, 30%, 40%, 50% even. But some kind of limit. Because there is no limit. And you might say, well, declaring all those wars is going to bite you. Not when you have visions across the world with factions that have no chance of even reaching you in the first place. The downside is that kind of vision may reveal your enemy. So if you're dealing with someone that has teleportation themselves, which obviously the AI won't use, but players would, that can be a problem. But again, even if you have someone like Arbble showing up over here, he's still going to have a fight on his hands in that dynamic. And number 3 is Bellacor of the Warriors of Chaos. First off, Bellacor has an insane level of campaign mobility. It might not be so easily available as it is for, say, Axolotl or Arbble or even Orion, but he can set up portals across the entire campaign map that only he can use. And he can use them with not just his own army, but with his heroes, with all other armies. If you're fighting against Bellacor, you can't use these portals against him. He can use them constantly against you. That makes dealing with Bellacor to be a pretty brutal affair to begin with. That kind of campaign mobility that he has. Because you never know if he's going to attack you at one point or another. If he sets up a portal, you are going to be screwed in a lot of ways. But there's more. A lot more. So, he can turn human lords into demon princes if he defeats them in battles or if he targets them with hero actions. That is fairly strong as a benefit. Then he starts with all Chaos God gift slots and a minus 25% upkeep for demonic units. One of the things that's not stated over there is that he has an infinite number of gifted units in his campaign. So everyone else in a Warriors of Chaos campaign or Champions of Chaos campaign has an infinite number of, has a finite number of gifted units. So hell cannons, greater demons, demons in general, that they can have in an individual army. Bellacor can have an infinite amount. And that's not all that we're talking about with respect to him. He can also confederate every other legendary lord of the Warriors of Chaos. The only one else who can do so is Archaon, and suffice to say it's far more likely for Bellacor to confederate the Archaon than the other way around. On top of that, his starting province over here in Albion is genuinely one of the most annoying provinces to ever assault in a campaign, because you do have not just one vassal in this province. You can get 2 vassals. You subjugate the minor faction of Tzeentch with their northern settlement, so you're dealing at 2 different factions that you have to overcome. And even landing in this place puts you in a vulnerable position, because you're not just going to be able, oh, I'll take a settlement, I'll be in a settlement, I'll start replenishment. That is not going to work so easily in this kind of context. But the Dark Fortress he has over here might as well be one of the most impregnable elements in the game because of Bellacor's campaign mechanics. At least if a player is behind the wheel with Bellacor, not if the AI. See, Bellacor has 1 gift of chaos of each type unlocked from the beginning of the campaign. He's the only one that has this. Archaon doesn't have it. Sigvald doesn't have it. Kolic doesn't have it. He's the only one. Everyone else has to spend dozens of turns to unlock these slots. He just starts with them. Now, that means he has more than just things like Shatterstone or Casualty or Replenishment for Marauder units, which themselves are pretty strong, to be sure. But he also gets a couple of benefits that makes him really, really good. First off, he gets the Bloom of Decay. So he gets 75 growth per region in all provinces after winning a battle. That is a ridiculous level of growth. Festus can do this. Festus is the only one that starts with the ability of doing this, and Festus is pretty ridiculous. Festus doesn't have an impregnable fortress on an island. Bellacor does. But that's not only the thing. You also have the entire roster of the Warriors of Chaos and Champions of Chaos available to you. You have a lot of power. You may not have Festus's plagues, but you can get post-battle loot, income from raising and sacking settlements, magical benefits, research rate if you're willing to sacrifice control, income, some of the best chariots, campaign movement range. The benefits just stack up. So when you combine Bellacor's Confederation capability, his portal capability, his starting location capability, and everything else, ends up being a ridiculous campaign. In fact, there's a firm argument to be made that Bellacor should be number 1 on this list. There's some reasons why I'm not doing that. Warriors accounts do have some weaknesses. They have to level up their units in order to actually get good ones. So while Warriors of Chaos are very strong, undeniably so, you are playing in a situation with Marauders and limitations on those. You can easily surpass those limitations, to be sure, but it is a bit of a vulnerability that can slow you down and can backfire against you. That's one problem that he does have and can hold him back. He also has a limitation on how many heroes he can have, all that kind of stuff. So there are limitations for Warriors of Chaos, but if you're playing a longer campaign, it won't matter. It just means that Bellacor is not so crazy compared to the other two campaigns that are on this list higher than him. And number 2 is Arbble, the Undefeated of Khorne. Now, if you're playing single player, this can be a really fun campaign, especially because you can decide how hard it's going to be. You also can have a bunch of very interesting fights to deal with. But undeniably so, this campaign is ridiculously broken in a lot of ways, and absolutely a bannable campaign if you're looking at multiplayer. Because consider this, on turn 2, if you sack this element and occupy it, you fight the camp over here, you can start teleporting around the world and start piling on significant amount of cash and significant amount of treasures. The fact that you can also do this against other legendary lords is pretty ridiculous. So it means from turn 2, Arbble can just show up and ruin your day if you're playing against them. That is ridiculous, but it gets only worse long term, because he might just be able to get the ability of teleporting to Zarnagrund and taking it very quickly. In this case, it didn't happen, but more often than not, the chance of you getting one of these challenges at Zarnagrund is fairly high. So once you take Zarnagrund, you start getting Minotaurs of Khorne, which are pretty ridiculous. That is very, very powerful. Then, you also have these kind of abilities. You get upkeep benefit, campaign movement range, being able to summon a cult, summoning a blood toast. Now, consider the cult situation. A cult allows you to teleport your legendary lord, so Arbble, to the area where it's at. So let's say you teleport Arbble, do one of these challenges, right? You set up a cult, then next turn, after that, you teleport Arbble to another location, and then after that turn, you can teleport Arbble to where the cult is. And then you create a kind of loop of constant teleportation, not just once, but twice per turn. That is ridiculous. And then the fact that every single challenge that Arbble does have can summon a blood host as well creates an even further ridiculous situation. It may take just a tiny bit of time for him to get the amount of Khorne's favor to be able to achieve that. But your starring army is one of the best early game recruitment options that you have in a campaign, because you get Chaos Warriors that are really good in both manual battle early on and auto resolve, which is relevant if you're thinking about multiplayer campaigns. Then you get Chaos Warriors of Khorne and Halberds. Then you start talking about Chosen, Skull Reapers at tier 3 in a campaign, which, yes, Chosen are ridiculous if you're thinking about that kind of situation in a campaign. You do need the provincial capital, though, for the structure over there for them. But it's still pretty ridiculous. Also, you can get, Chaos Warriors of Khorne with dual weapons very, very quickly there as well. And let's not even talk about things like Slaughter Brutes and the like. It is a heck of a lot of power that Arbble does have available very quickly in his campaign. He can get the heroes unlocked very quickly. He can construct mortal settlements faster than the others. Skulltaker and Scarbrand have their own significant benefits, but the mortal focus that Arbble has works in his favor, and that's not even touching on the skill line this bastard has. He gets a global recruitment duration of -1 turn, which, with full bloodletting, means that he can recruit the vast majority of units of Khorne in a single turn, including Chaos Knights. So if max out bloodletting, you get that global recruitment duration. It is pretty damn powerful. Then, we're not finished. Then you start looking at some other things that this guy also does have. He gets Hellblade for Chaos Warriors, Chosen, Chaos Knights, and Skull Crushers. That is pretty insane. You get Unbreakable for non-demonic units. in his entire army. You get devastating flanker for Chaos Knights and Skull Crushers. So you actually have better shock cavalry than Slaanesh for his army. So if you're playing against Arbble, it is fairly difficult to defeat him because he has that mobility, he has those blood toasts, he has those cults. He also has other armies and very fast and good unit recruitment. That makes Arbble an insanely broken campaign. For single player, it's great, it's fun, it's dynamic, and you are risking losing if you push too hard. So I think that's a great way of designing a campaign. But those very things make Arbble completely broken and very bannable in multiplayer. And finally, at number 1 is the Changeling. Worth saying that with respect to the Legendary Lords on this list, you should also consider the races that they belong to as also being inherently broken. Maybe not every Legendary Lord, but really a lot of it has to do with the racial design. So you do have Skulltaker, you have Scarbrand. It just wouldn't be a very interesting list if I just made an entire list of Warriors of Chaos, now would it? But you do have the Changeling. This is easily one of the most broken campaigns in every single way possible, not just in terms of power, but it doesn't work in a very fun way, I would argue. But you look at the Changeling situation over here in a campaign. You don't have settlements, but you do have cults. Those cults can be destroyed if you lose a battle with the Changeling, but it's only the cults that he has in a particular province. That gives him an extraordinarily strong defensive capability, because the Changeling does not care about settlements, so he's not interested in defending anywhere. As long as he has an army that, mind you, is invisible and has teleportation, you haven't killed him, and he can always recover from a lot of different things. And the worst part is he becomes stronger the longer the campaign drags on. Oh, you play a campaign as the Changeling and lost a bunch of settlements? No worries. Outside of a couple of specific recruitment settlements, which might be painful for a while to lose, it is very, very brutal to be dealing with a Changeling. Because he can easily get access to Forsaken and Sangors of Tzeentch in a campaign. He has a replenishment hero in his campaign, and he does have a good amount of ambush capability and teleportation capability in his campaign as well. Hell, his basic research gives him 10% casualty replenishment, 10 grimoires, and 10 cult supplies. The cult supplies are a limiting factor in his campaign, absolutely, and not really a great one, but it doesn't matter, really. Like, an entire army of Sangors and Forsaken is very difficult to defeat in a campaign, and then once you start getting into things like flying units, cavalry, potentially allied recruitment, it becomes even worse. Then you have the real reason that the Changeling and Tzeentch are at the top of this list, which is, of course, the changing of ways. Things like forcing peace, transferring settlements, forcing rebellions, halting an army, forcing a war, opening gates. It's the same reason people don't want to deal with Greece's Goldtooth in a lot of ways. But the thing about it is, like, Greece's mechanics are actually more tame in comparison to the Changeling. The Changeling just has bullshit on every single level that you could think of in a campaign. Because he has those invisible armies, he's a good ambusher, he's got a very strong defensive capability in his campaign, and the more you play this campaign, the worse it gets to deal with him. He has scalability in a way that few other campaigns have. You look at Khorne. Khorne requires you to continuously do stuff. If you start losing as Khorne, it's gonna start getting ugly. Pretty quick, actually. Whereas the Changeling, you kind of don't care, more or less. Because you look at the Changeling, right? You have these various features. Think of what each feature gives you. It gives you things like 10% casualty replenishment. It makes you immune to various corruption benefits. It gives you ward-saved characters. It gives you more cult supplies. The longer you play this campaign, the worse it is for anyone to try and defeat you. You cannot lose, even if you try. So your inherent power is already strong enough. You have few drawbacks. It's very difficult to get the Changeling in a position where he's actually on the back end. And even when you do, his recovery ability is simply ridiculous. Never mind the fact that he can continuously screw you over in more ways than one. This is the one campaign no one, absolutely no one wants to play against in multiplayer. Like, even every other campaign on this list is something that people are willing to tolerate to a degree or another, maybe some limitations, but no one wants to deal with the Changeling. Because even if you ignore the changing of ways, even if you ignore the teleportation, even if you ignore his defensive capability, or the sheer amount of trolling that he can do in a campaign, the fact that he cannot be killed unless you kill every army and remove every cult is fairly damn brutal. And he has a really good way of teleporting around the campaign map and opening those kind of rifts, portals, to get himself far away from any danger. And you might not know where he has gone until you do. That is power in a campaign. So even if you kill everything, as long as one lord of the Changeling survives, a single lord can have absolutely nothing to that army, you haven't defeated the Changeling. Well, a lord and maybe a cult. That cult could be, you could have a cult in Nagron and a cult in Cathay, or a cult in the middle of the northern Cast Wastes and one in the southern Cast Wastes. And he can do this simultaneously as well in his campaign. He has more recruitment capability than Khorne. Khorne has a limitation on how many units you can recruit per turn. Again, Khorne has a great campaign dynamic because you are risking things. You have something to lose. It's difficult to lose, but you can. I don't know what kind of player would lose a Changeling campaign, to be honest. Against either the AI or against the player. That's one of the reasons I consider this campaign the most broken in the game and one of the worst in the game. Because you have to have some risk. As small as it is, it has to exist. Or it's just pure fluff. That's all I had to say. Ghosteen here signing out. Let me know what you guys think about this subject. Of course, there's other campaigns you can consider. Yan Bo, for instance, you can consider Axialo, you can consider Tenuin, so on and so forth. There are other campaigns that would make this list, but I think these are the most broken and bannable campaigns in the game at the moment. And maybe some lessons, especially with things like Orion and the Changeling and Malice Darkblade, on what Creative Assembly shouldn't do in campaigns going forward.